If you thought the English version was bad, look at what they did to the German version of the game. That's a Steam forum post about Dragon Age Veilguard, where a user states that the German version, the German localization of the game, uses so-called inclusive language. And because I haven't seen anyone else talk about this, I thought I will just do it myself, considering that I'm German myself. So why not? I first stumbled over this post when a user in the Asmongold Reddit posted a screenshot of this Steam post, which for whatever reason got removed as of now. And we're basically talking about a situation, as another user wrote down here, that is very similar to the Spanish version of Spider-Man 2, where they had this Latinx kind of stuff, but in German it's even worse. And I would just say, let's just read what this user has to say. So the English version uses inclusive language, like they, them, right? Well, that's nothing compared to what they did to the German localized version of the game. In this forum post, the project manager of all localization brags about how he and his team applied fully gendered German language to the game, both in written and spoken text. What this means? Let me explain. There's no singular they in German, so what the German localization team did was to use so-called neopronouns. Pronouns that didn't really exist until trans activists made them up. I would like to remove the trans here, because I usually don't see this coming from trans people, because trans people usually just want to transition from one to the other and not being like stuck in the middle. So don't put crosshairs on the trans people, please. So now the game is full of the neopronoun hen, hem, and at the end of nouns there is an e attached. Imagine in English there's a guard, then with German gendering it would be garder, and if that was enough, they are also using stuff like the gender star and the double point, the asterisk and the colon. Here's an example if this were applied to English. Hen is a capable fighter, but the leaderess of the troop is not a reasonable personess. This sentence is a little bit ridiculous because I don't think that something like this is actually in the game, but I think it kind of shows relatively well how much impact it has to the German language, because you need to understand two things. First and foremost, German is significantly more complex than English, for that matter. A good thing to point it out, for example, are our pronouns, right? Very fitting to this topic. You have one pronoun case, we have three, and our pronouns sometimes change. And beyond that, we have the elements that signal the sex of a person baked into our nouns, right? We have three different articles, male, female, and neuter, and we have endings for our word that signal if we're talking about a female. It's just talking about female, right? So if they are basically making up a whole new pronoun for us that did not exist before, that 99.99% of people do not know about, and the rest of the people that know about it probably know about it from an ironic context, right? This feels incredibly intrusive. This is almost invasive in a sense, because as this user also states, there's no option to turn this off. I originally wanted to talk about the German language and kind of do a little lesson about German language so you would understand. But because every time I tried it, it took me 20 to 30 minutes, what kind of tells you a lot about the complexity of German language, I decided to not do this. If anyone is interested in me doing that, write it in the comments, but I won't do this right now. This is basically what this user has to say. I think, again, this sentence is a little bit too much. This sentence only would happen if both people, the fighter and the leader, would be non-binary, as far as I understood what they did in the game. But I think it shows, again, relatively well how much has to change if you want to have like this new pronoun for non-binary people applied into our language. Then let's look at the forum post. I don't have to talk about a lot here. I don't even know if the person that made this forum post is even the localization manager. Here he says, as the project manager for the localization in all languages, but ask me if that's actually the case, right? No fucking clue. Much more important, and that's where I think the whole topic becomes more interesting, he links 2 articles of German video game outlets. That's for one, an article from the GamePro, in fact that's a review, and an article from MeinMMO, and both sites are sister sites from the GameStar. And the GameStar is basically the German IGN. You can imagine everything that comes from IGN. GameStar is the same, but more potato. And both outlets, GamePro and the GameStar, gave the game a 9 out of 10. So that's the bar that we have here, right? A little bit more context maybe. GameStar is technically the PC magazine. GamePro is a console magazine, and MeinMMO, as you might have guessed from the name, is more about online games and MMOs. But you also sometimes just do reviews like this. And they talked about the gender speech in this game. So let's just look into it together. The German version of the game uses gender-neutral language. We at GamePro generally see this as a positive decision, but the implementation is not always entirely successful. For non-binary characters, the pronouns hen/hem, in English they, are used and an E is added to the title, such as Statthaltere. Statthalter, without the E, would just be city governor, just governor. And what is important to understand is that this is not like a translation or anything. These are the neo-pronouns. These did not exist before, right? These do not exist in the German language. Nobody uses them. Nobody. Maybe you find in some of the quote-unquote progressive cities, like Berlin or Cologne, inside of their minorities, you will find minorities that use gender speech. And then within these minorities, you will find people that use that kind of gender speech, because, yeah, sadly, there is not just one. But again, this is not like a translation. We simply don't have something that can be used similarly to the English they, them. That is simply not the case. Therefore, they had to make something up if they really want to pull through. And additionally to this hen/hem stuff, we then have this E, because for the German nouns, again, the sex for nouns that have like a relation to a person or even an animal for that matter, usually signal elements for that sex in their endings. So this ending is made up to signal a non-binary person. That's my understanding of it. Let's continue reading. However, the game explains this procedure far too late, so it can be quite confusing at first when a character is addressed with pronouns that some people have probably never heard of. A brief hint at the beginning about how the game uses gender-neutral pronouns would definitely have been helpful. Again, nobody has heard of that stuff. The people that have heard of this stuff in an ironic context. Beyond that, they don't exist, right? And you just need to think about it if that would happen to English. And I do understand it's sometimes kind of hard to translate changes in the language that you don't speak to your own language. But I think the significance of these changes kind of come through quite a lot, right? I think it's not as extreme as it is here, but kind of shows the margin of things. And now imagine you play a game, an RPG, where it's a lot about writing and text and conversations, you know, narrative, immersion, and then you suddenly stumble over worlds that you have never seen before in your own native language that nobody has asked for. Well, furthermore, the grammar is not always consistent. Sometimes the gender asterisk is used in text, then colons are used again, for example, for fighters, There are also occasional translation errors with pronouns, such as when Xi is spoken but hen is used in the subtitles. But on the whole, however, this is a minor stumbling block at an otherwise very successful localization, which is why it has no influence on our rating. We really need to keep this sentence in mind. Again, Xi, if that is something that they actually use in the spoken words, is also something that doesn't exist in German. That's even something that I have not heard about yet. It's very weird. One thing that might be interesting to know is we do have an unpopular, popular kind of gender speech, and that is what they meant down here. As I said, I won't teach you German, but we do have the attempt of some people to kind of include non-binary people into our language. The problem is that they're not very successful, right? They're not very successful, not a lot of people actually supporting this. If we have surveys, we are usually getting around 20% of people that are at least in support of the idea of gender speech. We are usually getting around 10% of the people that are in active support, so I guess those are then usually the people that might actually use it. But then when you see people use it, you find out very quickly that these people do not do this consistently, and that is not just because they are stupid and don't have a clue about grammar, what is one of the problems, but the other problem is simply because it is so hard to integrate into our language without making every single sentence sound like a noodle salad. Is that in English? Can you translate this into English? It makes it very confusing, right? Your own brain, if you want to speak it, has to constantly think about how to say words, and the other person that has to listen to you probably will have even bigger problems. So, especially for people that, for example, are analphabets or simply have issues in like reading and listening comprehension, this is in fact probably more exclusive to these people than it is effectively inclusive for non-binary people, which are, if we are very honest, already just such a marginal percentage of the population of any country, that it is quite something if you want to really push these things by force into countries. But I would at least like to show you some surveys real quick. We just go very quick about it, right? This is just some surveys. This is from 2021, right? These are blue is positive, gray is negative. You can see 10%, 60% are somewhat in favor of it, and the rest is meh, not so much, 10%. Then we have here another survey that actually compared surveys from 2020 and from 2022, where we have values from 2022 of 10 and 31%. The problem here is they include all kinds of gender language, and realistically for this type of quote-unquote popular gender language, gender speech, we are only coming out around 30% of people that actually like it a lot or are somewhat in favor for it, right? If you look at the distribution of both, because whatever reason they put those together, don't know why, where you can see that at least in the more recent study, we are at just about a quarter of people that are actually really in favor. We're talking here about values for the written texts and spoken of sub 10%. And then we have the most recent survey that we have, which was made with 5,000 people. So it is representative in 2023, right? And they had 5 options to choose if they generally think it is good or bad, right? And the results are quite telling. Quote, a representative survey by the Opinion Research Institute survey for the online shows at 80% the vast majority of German citizens aged 18 and above reject gender speech. Only 14% personally support gender and 6% are undecided. Only 14%, right? So we have studies where we have 2020 here, where we are at 55%, right? 2021, where we are around 25%. And then we have the most recent study, and that says that only 14% of people personally support gender speech. If nothing else, that these numbers at least show you that the tendency is downwards. You have less and less people that are in favor or even are supportive of gender speech in general. And again, this is just that. This does not include neopronouns. This does not include new endings. This does not include stuff like this Xi. Just to make that clear, right? But again, let's at least keep that sentence in mind. It's just a minor stumbling block and it has no influence on the rating. On the 9 out of 10 rating, right? So this is one journalist of the console magazine. Let's look at the other magazine that wrote about gender speech, because this person has a quite different perspective on this. Again, quote, "Let's move on to a point that has already been hotly debated on the internet. Gendering. All texts are gendered. This feels much more organic in English than in German. This is because Dragon Age the Veilguard uses a new and unusual form in German. Neopronouns. Pronouns like hen, hem are rarely used in everyday speech. What bothers me about it, especially in the game, is that there's no explanation for it, and it seems like a linguistic foreign body in the world. This is mainly due to the lack of description of what the pronouns stand for and the fact that all NPCs know how other characters want to be addressed before they even meet them, so it's not even realistic. It's not even a realistic approach to non-binary people. Right? This is particularly irritating at the beginning and really takes me out of the immersion every time. The Veilguard is the first Dragon Age I have ever played in English because of this. And this is quite telling because, again, nobody knows this stuff. Nobody has ever seen this stuff. They do not warn you. They just slap that into your face. It's not an option you can turn off. This is like straight up activism. And at least in this case, the journalist was so annoyed by it that this journalist that had to do a review for a German outlet, for a German-speaking audience, of technically of a German game, that he consciously switched to English so he doesn't need to bother with these things. Because it is so irritating for him and it takes him out of the immersion every time. By far not the only thing that takes you out of the immersion in this game, but here it is, right? A different perspective. Now you might think, hey, maybe it's just this project manager for the localization, right? Maybe it's just that dude that like did some rogue move and the EA didn't want that. Well, shit, they asked EA why they decided themselves for this type of gender speech, and they answered. Since non-binary language is neither universally established and standardized, nor officially recognized in grammar and dictionaries, or among the population, we worked with linguists to incorporate grammatical elements and pronunciations that aim to respectfully represent non-binary characters in our game. Okay. So, that comes from EA. Straight up. This is not something that was like a rogue move. That was not something that was an oopsie. That comes from EA. And that is, again, I've tried to explain it before. This is like, the whole text is like a foreign body. I will show you that in a second. But we cannot try to pretend that this does not come from EA. This is consciously made. This decision to butcher the German version of this game was made consciously, and well, I hope players will reward them for that. I've already heard that the refund rates are quite high, and I would really like to know what percentage of these refunds are coming from the German-speaking area in the world. We're talking here, by the way, about Germany, Austria, and parts of Switzerland, which I think together are more than 100 million people, right? So quite a lot of gamers, players within that population. And I think most of these people are probably not very happy. especially you need to keep in mind that not every German speaks English, right? So they don't have the option to just switch to another language. Not everybody speaks English like fluently or can understand English fluently. And especially old people, but can't say that the school education is particularly great either. So this is really something that is an activistic move smacked into the faces of German players. Now let's look how weird this is. I just made a little screenshot here so I can just show you where we are. First and foremost, they don't do it properly. That's what is already mentioned. This word should have this little star and this innen at the end of it, technically, right? Technically, if they want to be inclusive, but in that case they didn't do it for whatever reason. And then down here in blue I have marked all the parts where they changed something, right? You have like here changes to these two words where they basically change the ending. Again, they just have the E, usually it would be en, den hiesigen, and not just de hiesige. But I guess it's this added E that they now use for endings of words. And then you have like this hen, hens, hen, hen, hem. It's quite a lot, right? And again, this is just not comfortable to read. This is not comfortable to read. It is not comfortable to witness that kind of spoken language in a fantasy, medieval, role-playing game. I mean, the game has generally issues with that, but I think that is just a little bit more than I think most people can chew. Then, something that I thought was quite funny, in fact, they had the word medicus. And remember they said that they worked with linguists on this. If they were linguists, I have to wonder how they fucked something easy like this up. Medicus is Latin, and the ending us is for a male, right? Medicus, masculine. Medica, feminine, and medicum would be neuter. So technically they should have written here medicum and not medicus. But hey, linguists, right? And then I actually wanted to know how much of an issue that is, right? Do they just use it whenever they are in contact with a non-binary character, or is this like, or does this just go through the whole game? Like, do they try to neutralize the baked-in sex from our words across the whole game, or do they just do these changes when in contact with the non-binary characters in this game? That I did not find out, but as I clicked myself through several reviews, German reviews, I think in the end it was like 7 or 6 reviews, I noticed something else. Because these reviews, the people that made these reviews did had some parts in their reviews where they did in fact play the game in German, like here.
Dafür bekannt, sonderlich gütige Herrscher gewesen zu sein.
Right? But then if you just go a few seconds further.
I hope he's here and that he doesn't mind us disturbing him. He is a senior necromancer. I don't... Oh.
What was that? Was that English? Crazy. And the fact is actually funny. If you think about it, this is like a German outlet. PC Games is relatively big as well. In Germany. Is a relatively big outlet that makes the videos for a German audience that I think should review the German version of the game, because guess what? That's their audience. And then they play and then they play the game in English. Like just I can just skip through the video. Like 70-80% of this video is in fact in English, right?
We've gotten word from the wardens.
Have they found Gillenane?
Here again, English. They sometimes have like German parts in here. I don't know if that's like just the early game or something like that. but most of the time they in fact play the game in English. Let's see, again, English, 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 a little bit of German, and English again. So together with this incredibly good looking like to dislike ratio, we have outlets that shill this game. I should have probably looked up what rating they gave the game. The Veilguard is my personal game of the year. Okay, I guess it is probably also a 9 out of 10 or something like that. I think that would be to expect it. So again, these people are shilling like crazy, right? Same situation like here, a minor stumbling block, and it has no influence on our rating. But it obviously bothered you enough to play the game not in your native language for your German-speaking audience. And the same is true for the video of the GameStar. Again, this is like the PC magazine, the German IGN. Same story. They start the game in German, right? You have the character creator, everything fine in German. And they have also like, I guess some early part of the game where they also play the game in German. But if you just go a little bit further, is this English? Crazy. What's that? English? More English. English.
Haven't crossed, but I know our work has.
Crazy.
Andererseits bereit.
More English. Look at this. English. More English. 9 out of 10. Just saying. English. Also very convincing like the dislike ratio here. That's a joke. That's honestly a fucking joke. And again, I've looked at 7 or 6 different German reviews. One of them played the game completely in English, what is fine because they did not chill. It was like just a normal YouTuber that played the game. But 4 of these reviews went full on chill mode, and they all had significant amounts of footage in their review video where they played the game in English. And I think that is telling. This is more than telling. And again, it's not, oh, I'm surprised. I can tell you stories about the Cyberpunk launch of these magazines that will make you go crazy. Holy freaking shit. Like around that time, I was relatively deep, especially into in that GameStar community. But holy freaking shit. It's not like they have any credibility left that they could lose, right? But I think it tells you a lot that so many outlets shilled this game so hard, right? And again, here again in German, they did not even bother to put up with this gender bullshit themselves. But they try to tell you this is just a minor stumbling block. It does not have influence on our rating. It is so minor. Plays the game in English. Phew. And yeah, that's basically the Dragon Age Veilguard situation for the German localization. We have, let's just summarize all that, right? We have made up pronouns in this game that nobody's ever heard about. We have new endings for our words, for non-binary characters that also nobody has ever heard about, right? That nobody uses, right? That, again, gender speech is generally not popular. I've showed you some of the surveys, and this is literally unheard of. So I cannot imagine how much less popular this is, especially how intrusive this is for any kind of text, right? We need to understand, for this German version, I will say it again, EA consciously, I showed you the translation, they knew about it, they did this on purpose, went to the left-leaning side of like any kind of localization work. They found people that even use any kind of gender speech, and then they went so deep into this activist bubble to find the handful of people, quote unquote, linguists, they can't even do their fucking job properly, as even all the chill journalists mentioned, right? Inconsistent. It is mixed up. It is not a consistent type of writing. It is not explained to people that might not have the option to just switch to English. They have this foreign body of intrusive, of almost, yeah, of almost assaultive type of language butchering in their meant to be immersive fantasy medieval RPG. And I don't know, I think if any single person had the slightest doubt that this game is not 95% pure activism and 5% game, probably the leftovers from the people that are already gone from the studios, things like that should be just the cherry on top. It should be, at this point, it should be just proof. For any German that has to deal with this version of the game, and I hope really that the refund numbers are big here, because that means that people noticed that before the refund window ran out, right? So they can save their freaking money. I honestly, BioWare, we had Andromeda, Mass Effect Andromeda, we had Anthem, we now have this game. I don't know if they will be able to make a Mass Effect 5, and I honestly hope they won't be. Mass Effect Andromeda was not that great of a game, but at least was acceptable. Looking at Dragon Age the Veilguard, I don't want to know what they are going to do with the game, with this franchise. It's enough that they butchered this one. We don't need another franchise that gets butchered by activists in gaming. And honestly, if for whatever reason, after 2.5 complete failures, right? Anthem was a complete failure. This game I expect will be a complete failure, just numbers wise. And I think Andromeda at least had some solid sale numbers. I at least hope that they will be close before they were able to finish Mass Effect 5. If not, then I expect Mass Effect 5 to be the final nail in the coffin for the studio. That's my personal expectation. And that's everything there is in my opinion to say. This is the situation for the German version. Again, if anyone has questions, put it down in the comments. Share your thoughts with me, what you think about it. I would like to know from people of other languages, because this person specifically said that he's a project manager for all localizations in all languages, in allen Sprachen, in all languages. So I would like to know, are there more? Do we have Latinx in Spanish? Do we have stuff like that in other languages? I'm curious. I will not waste more of your time. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we might see us in another video. Until then, see ya.